Imagine British comedy without Mrs. Brown's Boys. Hard to picture, right? Whether people loved it or loathed it, this sitcom stormed onto screens in 2011 and quickly became a cultural phenomenon. With its crude humor, exaggerated characters, and loud, chaotic style, the show was unapologetically old school. But over time, several key cast members walked away, some quietly, others amid controversy. Why would anyone leave one of the UK and Ireland's most watched shows? Were personal rifts to blame? Creative disagreements? Or was there something deeper going on? Let's explore the real reasons why certain actors exited Mrs. Brown's Boys, and how those departures reshaped the series forever. The roots of Mrs. Brown's Boys stretch back long before its BBC success. The story began on modest stages in Ireland in the early 1990s. Brendan O'Carroll, then a stand-up comedian and struggling writer, had an idea inspired by the strong-willed Irish matriarchs he'd grown up with. Out of that came Agnes Brown, a no-nonsense, foul-mouthed Dublin mammy with both chaos and compassion in equal measure. She first appeared in a radio play, then in O'Carroll's self-published book, The Mammy, which laid the groundwork for what would later become a theatrical hit. Interestingly, O'Carroll never intended to play Agnes himself. The role was meant for an actress, but when she failed to appear at one of his early live shows, O'Carroll improvised. He slipped into a dress and wig, stepped onto the stage, and embodied the character himself. The result? Audiences loved it. They responded to the rawness, unpredictability, and relatability of this Irish mammy who broke the fourth wall, dished out insults laced with affection, and somehow held her chaotic family together through sheer willpower. As the stage version grew in popularity, O'Carroll took it across Ireland and eventually overseas. These productions weren't polished or conventional. In fact, part of their appeal was the chaos. Mistakes, missed cues, and unscripted interactions often became part of the act, with O'Carroll breaking character to banter directly with audiences. The humor was broad, brash, and unapologetically working class, which gave the shows a loyal following, particularly among Irish and British viewers who recognized their own messy, funny families in the exaggerated portrayals. 2 decades later, in 2011, Mrs. Brown's Boys finally hit television. BBC One took a chance on O'Carroll's low-budget sitcom adaptation, which retained many stage play quirks, live audiences, visible production flubs, and direct-to-camera asides. Critics tore it apart, dismissing it as outdated, crude, and cheap in its humor. Yet audiences disagreed. The show's warmth, chaos, and family-centered humor struck a chord. Part of its success came from its casting. O'Carroll surrounded himself with real-life family and friends. His wife, Jennifer Gibney, played Kathy, Agnes's daughter. His son Danny became Dermot, and his daughter Fiona played Maria. Even his sister, Eilish O'Carroll, joined as Winnie McGugan, the lovable neighbor. This closeness gave the series undeniable chemistry, something critics couldn't ignore. But the same intimacy also bred tension. As relationships evolved off-screen, occasional disputes inevitably spilled over behind the scenes. Despite the bumps, the show became bigger than ever. Tours sold out arenas in the UK and Australia. Christmas specials drew record-breaking TV audiences. Merchandise flew off shelves, DVDs sold in droves, and in 2014, Mrs. Brown's Boys the movie hit cinemas. Though panned by critics, it was a commercial success in Ireland and the UK. By then, Brendan O'Carroll hadn't just created a character. He had built a comedy empire. But with fame came fractures. Longtime cast members began to depart, some citing personal reasons, others pointing to professional disputes. Each exit left its mark, subtly reshaping the show that had once felt like an unstoppable force. Fans began to take notice. While Mrs. Brown's Boys has its flaws, it has nonetheless secured its place as a cultural landmark in British and Irish television. Whether loved or hated, its impact is undeniable. In an era dominated by slick, high-concept sitcoms and prestige, dramas, Mrs. Brown's Boys remains unapologetically itself, unrefined, old-fashioned, and defiantly different. Its success is a testament to resilience, passion, and the willingness to take risks, even if that risk involves a man in a cardigan shouting at his children in a mock living room. For Brendan O'Carroll, what began as a last-minute stage substitution grew into one of the most enduring comedy creations of his generation. Yet, just as the show found its rhythm on screen, change was already brewing behind the scenes, beginning with someone very close to O'Carroll. One of the first major departures that shook the fan base was Fiona O'Carroll's exit. She played Maria Brown, the kind-hearted but determined daughter-in-law of Agnes and the long-suffering wife of Dermot. Fiona was more than just another actor. She was Brendan O'Carroll's real-life daughter, and she had been part of Mrs. Brown's Boys since the beginning. From the early stage plays of the 1990s to the BBC primetime hit, she helped shape Maria into one of the most grounded and relatable characters in the series. So when news broke in 2022 that she would not join the live stage tour, fans were left stunned. To understand why her departure mattered so much, it's important to remember how deeply Fiona was tied to the show. Mrs. Brown's Boys was never a conventional sitcom. It was a family affair. Fiona quite literally grew up with it, long before the TV cameras, international tours, and fame. She played Maria when jokes missed their mark on stage, when lines were flubbed, and when the laughter came with a wink and a nudge. Over time, Maria evolved from the quiet newcomer to a central figure in the Brown family chaos, the calm within the storm, the voice of reason amid the outrageous antics. In interviews, Fiona spoke openly and honestly about her decision to leave. After more than a decade of playing Maria, she felt she had reached a turning point in her life. "I felt like I was living someone else's story," she explained. "I needed to write my own." It wasn't about abandoning a character so much as saying yes to herself. A mother in her 40s, she had discovered a life outside the iron grip of the Brown household. Her choice wasn't impulsive, it was thoughtful and deeply personal. She wanted to spend more time with her children, explore new opportunities, and step away from something that no longer felt like hers. Naturally, fans speculated. Was there drama behind the scenes? Was family tension a factor? After all, leaving a show where your father is both the star and the boss couldn't have been easy. But Fiona was quick to dismiss the rumors. In multiple interviews, she emphasized there was no fallout, no fight, and no bad blood. Her relationship with her father remained strong. Brendan echoed the same sentiment, expressing pride in her choice. "She's my daughter first, not just Maria, and I admire her for knowing what she needs." Still, her absence was deeply felt. Maria Brown may not have been the flashiest character. She wasn't part of the wigs, pratfalls, or outrageous antics, but she was vital. For Dermot, she was the emotional anchor. For Agnes, she was the balance to her madness. And for viewers, Maria was often the most relatable presence, a character who reacted like a real person in the middle of cartoonish chaos. Without her, Mrs. Brown's Boys felt a little more unhinged and a little less grounded. Although other characters stepped up, the difference was clear. Fiona's departure left a visible gap in the show's dynamic. For years, the real strength of Mrs. Brown's Boys lay in its tight-knit cast, a unique combination of family members and lifelong friends. Yet over time, even that seemingly unshakable core began to shift. One of the first signs came with Fiona's departure. Her decision to step away. Then came another departure, one that hit even harder. Rory Cowan, who played the flamboyant and glamorous Rory Brown, stunned fans in 2017 when he announced he was leaving Mrs. Brown's Boys. He wasn't just another character. He embodied the spirit of the series. With his energy, outrageous fashion sense, razor-sharp wit, and unforgettable banter with Agnes, Rory brought a joy and vibrancy to the show that few could match. For many viewers, he wasn't simply a cast member, he was Mrs. Brown's son. Losing him felt like losing a part of the heart of the show. Cowan's connection to the Brown family went back long before the cameras. He had originally worked behind the scenes as Brendan O'Carroll's publicist, promoting early stage shows across Ireland and the UK. When the role of Agnes's son Rory came up, Brendan offered him the part as a temporary measure. But Rory proved a natural. With his bleached hair, infectious laugh, and unique presence, he brought the role to life in a way no one else could. Audiences quickly fell in love, and Rory became an irreplaceable fixture of the cast. That's why his departure from the live stage tour in 2017 shocked so many. The obvious question arose: why would someone so central and seemingly so happy walk away from such a successful show? The answer turned out to be deeply personal. Rory later explained that it wasn't about arguments, creative disagreements, or any conflict with Brendan. Instead, it was about his mother. For over a decade, he had cared for his aging mom while juggling the intense touring and filming schedule. The constant time on the road placed enormous strain on him. After his mother's death, Rory began to reassess his life. He admitted that, for some time, he had felt emotionally detached. As he put it, "I was sad on the show. I didn't enjoy it. I needed to go." His decision wasn't a rejection of the people he worked with or the fans he loved. It was simply that he had outgrown the place he once thrived. The joy that once fueled his performances had been replaced by grief, exhaustion, and the need for something more personal. Known for his big laugh and bold outfits, Rory's exit became an unexpectedly quiet act of self-care. Fans supported his decision, though it wasn't easy for them. Rory's character was not retired, but recast, with Damien McKiernan, a former Mr. Ireland, stepping into the role. Damien gave the part his best effort, but for many viewers, it just wasn't the same. The spark, the comic rhythm, the easy chemistry with Agnes, it all felt missing. Audiences struggled to adjust. The new Rory looked nothing like the old one, and his interactions with Agnes lacked the familiar magic. Something essential had disappeared. And while the show continued, Rory Cowan himself did not fade away. Rory eventually branched out into different projects. In 2019, he joined the cast of the long-running Irish soap Fair City, taking on the role of John Bosco Walsh. It was a change of pace and a shift in type of role, giving him the opportunity to demonstrate his dramatic range beyond comedy. Around the same time, Rory Cowan was also releasing his memoir, Mrs. Cowan's Boy, in which he opened up about his life, his sexuality, his family, and, of course, his years on Mrs. Brown's Boys. The book painted the portrait of a man who had lived many lives as a performer, a caretaker, and a son, always trying to remain true to himself. Although Rory's departure from the show was relatively low-key compared to his big entrances on stage, the impact of his character endured. He may not have dominated every scene, but he consistently brought heart, warmth, mischief, and color to the Brown household. To audiences, he was a source of joy. To the show itself, he was a cornerstone. And to Brendan O'Carroll, he was not only a co-star, but also a trusted friend. While Rory eventually put away the wig and heels, his portrayal of Rory Brown remains one of the show's most beloved highlights. Yet, if you thought that was dramatic, the next departure from Mrs. Brown's Boys raised the stakes even higher. Of all the exits, Gary Hollywood's may have been the most controversial. He had played Dino Doyle, the flamboyant, fashion-forward hairdresser and Rory's on-screen partner, since the earliest TV specials. With his immaculate hair, sharp wit, and irresistible charm, Dino quickly became a scene stealer. His chemistry with Rory, originally played by Rory Cowan, made them a fan-favorite duo in a show already filled with chaos. Dino's over-the-top personality and loyal friendship added balance and sparkle to the ensemble, and fans adored him for it. But in 2020, things changed abruptly. Gary left the show, and unlike Rory's quiet transition, this departure was sudden, noisy, and headline-grabbing. For a program that prided itself on being one big happy family both on and off screen, the circumstances around Gary's exit were unsettling. There was no farewell episode, no explanation within the storyline. Dino simply disappeared from the Christmas and New Year specials. Naturally, fans were left demanding answers. Gary later explained that the issue stemmed from a pay dispute. He claimed that both he and Damian McKiernan, who had stepped into the role of Rory Brown, were being paid far less than the rest of the cast for the 2020 holiday specials. When he raised the issue with the production team, he alleged that he was dismissed from future episodes. After more than a decade on the show, he described the decision as a shock. What hurt the most, he revealed, wasn't just losing the role, but the sense of betrayal from a production he had believed treated its cast like family. Events moved quickly. Gary filed a lawsuit against Brendan O'Carroll and other producers, citing unfair dismissal, discrimination, and unequal pay. The case exploded into a major public controversy in Ireland and the UK, turning Mrs. Brown's Boys from a sitcom into the centerpiece of a legal drama. Fans were split. Some sided with Gary, insisting he had been wrongfully dismissed after years of loyalty. Others defended Brendan, suggesting it was either a misunderstanding or simply a business decision. Regardless of where anyone stood, the show's carefully built family image had taken a serious blow. Brendan O'Carroll denied the accusations, insisting there was no discrimination and describing the situation as an unfortunate misunderstanding. He expressed surprise at how public it had become, saying he had tried to resolve matters privately. But with legal action underway and the media frenzy growing, reconciliation became impossible. Dino was gone, with no replacement hairstylist, no comic relief stand-in, no explanation, just absence. For longtime fans, the loss of Dino was far more than a casting change. He had brought something unique to the world of Mrs. Brown's Boys, flamboyant yet grounded, vibrant yet deeply loyal. His friendship with Rory and his comedic clashes with Agnes gave the show an extra spark. Without him, some storylines felt unfinished, and certain character dynamics subtly shifted. It was also a stark reminder that even shows built on family and laughter aren't immune to behind-the-scenes fractures. The ensemble, once viewed as unshakably close-knit, was suddenly under an uncomfortable spotlight. Since leaving, Gary has remained mostly quiet on the finer details of the case, though he has repeatedly expressed his disappointment in how it all played out. He has continued to act in stage shows and make public appearances, but he never again returned to Mrs. Brown's Boys. For many fans, though, he will always be remembered as Dino, the flamboyant, confident hairdresser who lit up the screen every time he appeared. His departure left a void that has never quite been filled. The show goes on, of course, but there's no denying that someone important is missing. Jennifer Gibney, who portrays Kathy Brown, Agnes's intelligent, modern, and often underappreciated daughter, has been with Mrs. Brown's Boys since the very beginning. Her role is distinctive not only because of the character she plays, but also because of her real-life connection to the show's creator. Jennifer is married to Brendan O'Carroll, the man who brings Agnes Brown to life, their on-screen mother-daughter. Relationship has always carried a quirky, surreal charm, made even stranger by the fact that, off-screen, they are husband and wife. Yet, as the seasons progressed, fans began to notice something curious. Kathy was slowly fading into the background. From the start, Kathy was written as the straight man, the calm, logical, career-minded anchor in contrast to the chaos of the rest of the Brown family. As a psychologist, she was usually the voice of reason, though often reduced to the punchline whenever her mother sabotaged her dignity. Her romantic missteps, failed relationships, and deadpan delivery were staples of the early seasons. But by the mid-2010s, things began to change. Kathy appeared less often, her scenes grew shorter, and her once prominent role began to feel more like a cameo. Fans quickly noticed. Speculation began to spread. Was Kathy being written out? Was there friction behind the scenes? Some even wondered whether Brendan was deliberately phasing out his wife's character. While it sounded dramatic, the shift was undeniable, and rumors flew. Some suggested the tense on-screen dynamic between mother and daughter had started to mirror reality a little too closely. Others believed Jennifer might have simply grown tired of playing the same part, especially one where she was frequently talked over, dismissed, or mocked by her husband in drag. In truth, though, the explanation was far less dramatic and much more practical. Jennifer explained in interviews that her reduced appearances were the result of a decision she and Brendan made together. There had been no fallout, no creative clashes, no behind-the-scenes arguments. Brendan, in fact, has repeatedly praised Jennifer, often describing her as his greatest creative partner. Both have said that scaling back Kathy's role was a deliberate choice, giving Brendan more space to develop new and secondary characters like Buster, Winnie, or Grandad. At the same time, Jennifer admitted she felt Kathy's journey had run its course. For her, it was either time for a major reinvention of the character or a graceful retreat. From a storytelling perspective, the decision made sense. Kathy represented the modern daughter trying to remain sane in a dysfunctional household. But after several seasons of recycled jokes and failed romances, finding new material for her had become increasingly difficult. Rather than force her into stale storylines, Brendan and Jennifer opted to let the character step quietly into the background. Kathy was never officially written out, but her appearances grew rarer, her involvement in main plots diminished, and she drifted into more peripheral roles. For longtime fans, though, her absence was deeply felt. From the very first episode, Kathy had been part of the show's emotional backbone. She was the steadying presence in a world of chaos, grounding the series with her dry wit and exasperated eye rolls. Without her, the Brown household became a little more unhinged, and the overall dynamic shifted. With fewer straight characters left, the tone leaned harder into slapstick and surreal comedy. Whether this made the show better or worse is still hotly debated among fans, but what's undeniable is that Kathy's quiet departure left a noticeable gap, and just when fans thought they had adjusted, came another shock. The final reason someone left Mrs. Brown's Boys truly stunned the audience. When Rory Cowan left in 2017, it wasn't just another cast change, it was a seismic shift. Cowan had been part of the show for decades, adored by fans for his flamboyant energy and flawless comedic timing. When Damien McKiernan was announced as the replacement, the weight of expectation was instant and overwhelming. A former Mr. Ireland, with only a handful of acting credits, Damien was stepping into the shoes of a character that audiences had grown to love, a character whose identity had been crafted so closely by the original actor. For Damien, it was at once a golden opportunity and a daunting challenge. His take on Rory Brown was, by nearly every account, quite different. Rory Cowan's version of the character had been loud, flamboyant, and full of colorful expressiveness. Damien's interpretation, however, was more subdued, quieter, more grounded, and far less showy. Fans immediately noticed the difference. Many struggled to adjust to the new tone. It wasn't so much a question of Damien's talent. He certainly had moments where he shined. But the undeniable truth was that the chemistry and rhythm between Brendan O'Carroll's Agnes and Cowan's Rory had shifted. To some viewers, it felt like a completely different character. Despite the criticism, Damien stayed the course. He remained with the show for several years, appearing in Christmas specials and live performances. Slowly, some viewers came to accept his interpretation, while others remained firmly attached to the original. It was a difficult balancing act, staying true to a character while also leaving your own mark, especially when the role had already been defined so intimately by another actor. Through it all, Damien kept a professional demeanor. He showed up, played his part, and fit himself into the ensemble. Yet, behind the curtain, things were not as smooth as they seemed. By 2020, whispers began to spread. Damien's absence from promotional materials and specials was becoming clear. Rumors pointed to a pay dispute, the same one that had surrounded Gary Hollywood's controversial exit. Reports suggested that both Damien and Gary were stunned to discover how vast the pay differences were compared with some of their fellow cast members during the Christmas and New Year shoots. When the issue was raised, Gary quietly left, and it's believed that Damien, too, decided not to linger much longer. His departure was sudden and unannounced. No confirmation, no farewell episode, no closure. He simply disappeared from the cast lists. That quiet exit spoke volumes. On the surface, Mrs. Brown's Boys was all about laughter and roaring live audiences, but backstage tensions ran deep. The dispute highlighted bigger questions about how the cast was treated, particularly those who weren't O'Carroll family members. Brendan O'Carroll dismissed the claims, insisting it was a misunderstanding rather than unfair treatment. But by then, the damage was done. Fans noticed the absence, while critics pointed once again to the recurring issue. When cast members vanished from the show, they often vanished like smoke, with little explanation and rarely a proper send-off. For Damien, the whole experience must feel bittersweet. On one hand, he had the privilege of joining one of the biggest comedy successes in Britain and Ireland. On the other hand, he endured constant comparisons to a much-loved predecessor, found himself caught in disputes that long predated him, and ultimately exited without ceremony. It is no small task to take over a role so firmly tied to another actor, especially when the audience clings to the original. Even though Damien gave everything he could to the part, Rory never quite felt the same as before. And now,